Great. So welcome to everyone who has joined us, and hopefully we get a few more people soon. I know this is a hard time to join, and I really appreciate all of you taking your time. This is part of a series that we started back in January to really reach out to new teachers specifically to help get them some extra PD and resources and information. And we've opened it up to different groups as the months have gone by. And this month, we were able to open it up to a wider audience. So we're very grateful. I know that many people have, ELLs in their classroom and are always looking for different supports, especially in this crazy year that we've been having. So I just want to thank all of you for taking the time. And I am going to turn it over to my colleague, who will be one of the presenters, Giselle Lundy-Ponce.
Great. Thank you so much, Robin. And thank you to our wonderful group here today on Thursday evening. And as Robin was saying, I'm Giselle Lundy-Ponce with the AFT, and I am just thrilled that we also have our one of our most go-to instructional experts on ELLs, Christina Robertson. I have been at the AFT now for, this will be my 21st year. And I am the point staff person for issues around ELLs, but most of my expertise is in the policy and programmatic arena, not so much the classroom instruction piece. And so then that's why I always count on our classroom experts, our advisors, and folks like Christina Robertson here today. So we have a really exciting agenda for you, and I'll let Christina introduce herself.
Hi, thanks for the great introduction, Giselle. And I have to say, I've been honored to be connected with the AFT and Colorin, Colorado for many, many years. When I think about where we started and everything that we bring to the field today, it's just really one of the highlights of my career. And I'm excited to be here with you today. And I think we have some good information to share. It may not be earth-shattering or things that you haven't already been doing, but I think it's really great right now as we're feeling some relief from the pandemic to start thinking about where we'll be going with this. So I'm the English Learner Program Administrator for Roseville Area Schools, and the district is right next to St. Paul, Minnesota. We have about 1,200 English learners, and we have probably 70 languages and a lot of refugee population. So it's just a great little place to experiment with lots of new ideas and work with some really great people in Minnesota. So really happy to be here with you today.
Wonderful. Well, part of the advantage of working from a national standpoint at AFT is that we get to hear from educators from coast to coast about what's going on, and we get to also have quite an impact when we advocate at the national level, at the federal level. So here is our agenda. So we are going to be talking about not returning to what we had, but returning to better. What can we be doing better around family engagement, social emotional support, instruction, collaboration, and advocacy, and then get into our resources for you. And the resources part for Colorin, Colorado, if you are not using it right now, or Colorin, Colorado is new to you, you're in for a treat. It is a partnership project between the AFT and PBS station WETA. And the director for Colorin, Colorado is Lydia Bryseth, who works at WETA, and she's joining us here for a little bit. And so you have to stay till the end to hear all about it. So we'll go to our next slide. And everything that we will be telling you about today and referencing, Lydia has very handily put together in one link. So all the resources that you'll be hearing about are on this page already. And thanks so much, Lydia, for all the help today. Other resources that we will be putting on there that will also be very helpful for you and for your colleagues, because we don't want this information to just stay with you, but if you can somehow disseminate it, that'd be great. We have a Share My Lesson webinar on what ELL educators need to know as schools reopen, and that was a just fabulous webinar on Share My Lesson, and Christina was a part of that too. And then we'll be preparing to present at Teach, and we are also hosting our Summer Educator Academy, and we have our ELL 101 coursework, which Christina was the lead developer for that, the mother of the ELL 101 coursework for AFT. So all right. So Christina, do you want to get us started on this, and then I'll get the
Sure. So we just kind of want to do like a little warm up, a little check in about what strengths you saw in your English learners or other students during the pandemic. If you are in a context where you weren't working directly with students, you could talk about maybe some of the strengths that you saw in educators that you work with and or students that they reported to you. So the idea being that we really want to start by talking about the assets that students do bring to their learning situation, even when it's a pandemic, and then and kind of go from there to see where we want to focus our energy as we go forward coming out of this pandemic learning experience. So Giselle, do you have the
Yes. So if you
that?
go to
Okay.
so if you go to your phone or even on your laptop and just go to menti.com and use the code there, 8226-9992, and just put in your answer, then we'll get to see everyone's answers pop up here.
Hmm, cool. A new tool.
Yes, I just learned about it myself.
There
And
we go. We're trying out new things. This is all in the spirit of growth in very public ways. So, um, oh, we want to type in the chat? Sure. Use this link, and here's the code. And then you can put it on your phone or on your computer. And then, what were your students' strengths during COVID?
showing up and trying, gosh, that sometimes that was like half the battle. Students were able to advocate for themselves and ask teachers for help. Perseverance.
So it only let me put in one response. I guess you couldn't see voting results when you do this, but if there are things that people want to share that they can't put on Mentimeter, we can put them in the chat too, I think.
Well, I think you have to sign in again to.
Oh, okay. Maybe if I go back to, if I put my code in again, then I bet I could put in another one.
Or refresh it and then it'll.
Oh, yeah. Refresh it. There you go. I'll do it. Students taught me new technology. Yes. Flexibility to change on the fly. Exactly.
Students learned how to advocate for themselves with email. Yes, email was such a new concept to so many kids. Resilience. Yes. And seeing that it's, it's a very intimate group. Does anybody want to expand a little bit on their answer and tell us a little bit more?
We can do the popsicle sticks and call on people. I would just like to point out as we go into our discussion in the slideshow that one of the things I really was so impressed with students and families about, but not that I've always known, but it really became clear when you're basically coming into students' own homes, was how much they were responsible for multiple things. We had, multilingual learners who were teaching their younger siblings and providing some childcare while also doing their own classes and providing tech support for families that live nearby for them, to help parents get connected with teachers. So I really saw in some ways some real leadership opportunities for our students, and that's not necessarily recognized in our educational system. So definitely very hard, not the way we'd like to do things, but I was amazed at how many teachers expressed true wondering and amazement at everything that our students can do and do every day that is invisible to most teachers. So it's pretty neat.
And I see Katie's hand is up. And Katie, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, you are. And good afternoon. Thank you for this forum. I wanted to echo what Christina just mentioned. At our higher socioeconomic high schools, the teachers would deliver materials to students and they had no idea the living conditions. And so I think that what students, one of the gains for students in the future is they're going to have teachers that are much more empathetic about what they're expecting students to do with the resources that limited resources and their resiliency. So, but then I wanted to also comment on the students learn that they can advocate for themselves and that they have a voice, but parents as well. I don't think it got recorded in this. Students and parents were so much more engaged with schools than they traditionally were. Having parent conferences with counselors or intervention specialists, it gave the parents in the community voice, where previously if they didn't have transportation, and that's one of they weren't able to attend meetings. And I think that that's one of the gains that in education we need to acknowledge and not lose. So
Definitely. Oh, Katie, so many good things in there. So I'm going to stop this share and then go back to our PowerPoint. So
I know you moved the slide quickly, so we went to the Mentimeter, but when you bring the slide back up, one of my colleagues, our colleagues who work to advise the AFT, Ingrid Mira, is in a picture on there, and she's got a really cute little dialogue with students. So take a second to read that. Ms. Mira is amazing, and I hope to be her when I grow up. She is so positive and smart, and just connects so well with the students and families. And so, yeah, just kind of everybody thrown into different roles this year, and that personal connection that you were talking about, Katie, really comes through when you see things like this, right? So very neat.
all right. Well, thank you, everybody. All right. So time for reflection.
Is this me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So we've obviously started the theme here, which is of course, there were challenges and some very traumatic moments during this pandemic learning time. However, what we'd like to reflect on is there were successes as well. There was a lot of growth. People experienced challenges but overcame them. So we want to really frame this whole conversation around, like, what are your strengths? What were some of your students' strengths? And how do we keep what worked well and will continue to benefit our multilingual students, and let go of some things, maybe some expectations we've traditionally had that maybe don't work so well for our students. I will just say that I think a lot of educators began to truly understand how much we have students who are compliant because they show up and they're in our classrooms every day, versus now when we're in a pandemic, students could vote by just showing up or not showing up, doing an assignment or not doing an assignment. So there are definitely some things that we learned in this experience that can help us in improving our educational experience for all, I think. And what I'm really hoping is that educators can return to better, feel rejuvenated after some downtime in the summer, and be able to advocate for the strengths that were developed during the pandemic and move forward with that. So that's what we're going to talk a lot about today. Okay, a little video clip.
So this is a compilation of some of your fellow new teachers from Robin Vitucci's new teacher cadre, and these are some of their reflections that we captured. So let's watch this.
If I knew then what I know now.
Slow down. Don't panic.
I don't want to burn out. So what can I do to continue to go with the flow and adapt, right? While still having a voice.
You're in it for the long haul. I know it's going to be tough, but like if you take these action steps right now, you'll be good.
Give yourself heaps and heaps and heaps of grace and patience and self-care for sure.
Somehow I'm going to adjust to it, and it's gonna become the new normal.
Just worry about what you had to get done today.
Trying to give them a place where they can come and kind of disconnect from what's going on at home and talk to each other. And even if that's not always based on the content we're learning, especially in an ELL classroom, the ability to just make those connections with each other, with me, I think that's the one thing I wish I had started earlier when the lockdown started.
Oh,
Beautiful.
that's the best.
Yeah, that's right. And I'd be interested if any of you have thoughts that you want to put in the chat about that same question. If you knew what you know now, what would you advise yourself at the beginning of the pandemic? Maybe what's a learning for you?
Or you can just share with us if you don't want to
You
write.
can unmute yourself too. This is a lot like an EL class. Yes, assign less work, give less assignments. Be patient and take care of yourself. I wish we'd had more mental health support which also speaks to the fact that there wasn't enough mental health support to start with, right? And now it's another kind of pandemic and mental health things. But in my district, we're really trying to put our best foot forward, and really as leaders and educators talk about what can we do better than we were doing before. How can we return to better? We don't want to return to normal because we know normal wasn't working for all of our students. I'm from the Twin Cities area, and you probably know there's been quite a bit of racial tension and violence here, and so that's really hit our schools very hard at a time when we're also experiencing a pandemic. So it's been kind of a good problem to have, in the way that it's really brought to the forefront equity and really examining some institutional practices that we've always accepted and we don't want to accept anymore. So some questions to think about is, as we go forward, what things can we do better and what will we keep or let go of? So we'll talk about some things. We'll take a break, and you can chime in on what you think.
And I was thinking also, Christina, that these are great questions for planning in the fall. If you have if you're part of a professional learning community, these are good questions to have with your, with your fellow educators, right. With your administrators, with your department head, because I think what may be happening in some schools too is like everybody's just trying to rush and see, okay, now we're going to open up in fall 5 days a week, working on schedules and not really processing everything that's happened in the last year.
Yeah, there will be a lot of people who will feel relieved that we can get back to normal. Even though they did grow this year, there are many, many more years where they worked in a normal environment, and they're looking forward to that. And I would just say, if you can go back to that slide, I would just recommend, if you are so motivated, I would take a screenshot of this slide and send it to any district or principal leaders that will be making decisions about next year right now. Because there are funds that are coming into states and districts to help them in eliminating the gaps that were created during this time and other things that are going on. And a lot of those decisions are being made now to impact the beginning of the school year. So it might be worth it to ask, how are we going to answer these questions as we go forward? Okay.
All right. So next.
So some of the areas that we've been focusing on in my district: return to better, multilingual family engagement. I have to say that is a personal point of pride and something I am going to hang on to tightly, and they're going to have to pry my hands off it to have it go back to the way it was, because there's been a lot of real good growth and connection there. Social emotional support for the whole child. We did weave in social emotional support for children in our district. We need it for our adults as well. And the only way you can really know how to do that well is if you can do it well as an adult. So what does it look like to systemically put that in place and keep it there? And then equity in instructional planning and collaboration. There were many people, just frantic to collaborate and find out, what can I do for my ELs? They're not understanding what I'm putting on this online environment, that sort of thing. This kind of urgency that I have not experienced much in my career as an EL professional. And I don't want to lose that as we go forward. Some really great collaboration came from those emergency feelings. And so we still have a learning emergency. It's just that we have become accustomed to the learning emergency that has happened in our normal day-to-day. So I don't want to go back to that, being comfortable with that.
And can anyone in the group speak to any of these that they have done at their school particularly well? Or maybe if it was a big challenge to overcome?
Or you can put it in the chat.
Well, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Oh, here comes Katie.
I don't mind unmuting. So I wanted to pair the two questions on the previous slide with this. And in California, we had a requirement of daily live interaction with students. So our district remained in distance learning up until 6 weeks ago. And then we transitioned to a hybrid. And I'm in California. And so our daily live instruction was an advisory period where it was a smaller group, under 20. And that's where the social emotional lessons were delivered. And when it was first implemented, many of our high school teachers, especially higher level classes, those instructors were so hesitant, negative about having it. Like, I'm a teacher of chemistry. I don't do social emotional.
I'm AP.
I'm AP. Yeah, and
We don't have feelings.
or the kids won't talk about their feelings, right? And so, though I will say, I feel that social emotional learning, SEL, is being overused without a clear definition of what it's going to look like, because we really don't know what both staff and students are going to need once we're completely in person. But I sent a survey, so we had this advisory period, and then suddenly I stopped hearing complaints. And I sent a survey yesterday because the district's interested in including it in next year's schedule. And I thought, okay, I got to find out, litmus test, what's going on. And 75% of 1,000 teachers is saying, yeah, let's do this. And please let it be my students. Let's start the day with it. So I think that both what did we learn and what do we need to throw out? And I think it's what we learned is that there is value to building those relationships, and it does translate to instruction and students learning. But throwing out is the idea that you teach chemistry because what you do is you teach students. And so I that's what I would say. And again, we have so many more parents involved in our schools. So that's all.
That's awesome. Thank you, Katie. That's really good. And I really like what you said about the social emotional support, or SEL, is thrown around and it's not really defined. And everybody thinks it's just about feelings, like every day or every class, somebody's going to say like, well, how do you feel about this? And how are you feeling about that? And it's like, there's so much more to that. It's about creating this climate of comfort and security and inclusion that we've been working on for a long time. And now I think people just realize it's like air. You have to have it, or kids aren't going to learn that well. So I think that was a very, very good point. Thank you for sharing.
And I was going to share that on the social emotional support piece, is that I've heard from our ELL teachers that they were so often the ones that if a child was having trouble in another class, like they would just call the ESL expert or, the ELL professional at the school and say like, can you handle this? But in this new environment, many ESL teachers, felt the need to push back and say, don't we have a counselor? Don't we have a school psychologist? Don't we have some other kind of specialized instructional support provider at the school? And sometimes there is poor communication between teachers and these professionals and vice versa. So many times a challenge with a child is not going to be best addressed in an ESL classroom if they need a therapeutic intervention. And so it's a matter of having not just bilingual staff who do this kind of work, but culturally responsive, culturally intuitive people who do this kind of work.
Yeah, very true.
All right.
So let's talk about family engagement a bit. Katie mentioned this, and I think this is a trend across the nation where people have really put some effort into this during the pandemic, that voila, if you put the right tools in place and you have the intention that all multilingual families will be able to connect with educational staff, things can happen, that they really do end up connecting, right? So just some things that we did in my district, we used applications for messaging. So we've already had like a Blackboard Connect. It was like a robocall, robotext system, which we began with, and it works really well. Although in the beginning of the pandemic, we realized that the messages were coming so fast and furious that our families were just literally getting like 12 messages a day, and they weren't even picking up the phone because they're like, oh God, it's another one. I don't even know what that is. So we began to kind of analyze a little bit. Teachers began to use Talking Points. It's an app, maybe you've heard about it, but you can send messages in English, and then it comes to different receivers in different languages that they have denoted. And so it was really powerful for a lot of our families. And I like the story that one of the EL teachers, a Somali boy, came online and he said, Miss, I didn't know that you know Somali. You wrote to my mom. And so he was amazed that the EL teacher could write Somali. And so when I started teaching ESL long ago, people always said, how did you learn all those languages? And I'm like, it's finally come true. We could just use an app and prove that we know like 100 languages. So, but that was very pivotal because it put in teachers' hands the ability to connect really easily with a lot of our families. And a lot of our families, we found, of course, don't use email as much, but they definitely use texts and often Facebook. So we began doing Facebook Lives where we would just go on, there's a picture, a screenshot right there, where we did a Facebook Live on early childhood. And so our Colorin cultural liaisons were there. And so we just talk to families about what you can be doing with your young children. How can you do some positive behavior intervention if you're struggling at home right now? What if you need more support? What can we do? So our cultural liaisons are fabulous and very well known by our families, so they trust them and they come to things where they will be present. And so using that resource and outreach was really important. And then what we saw was, we might only have 20 people who come to the Facebook Live session, but we found that it was shared and viewed hundreds of times after that, which really worked for our families because maybe they're working, maybe they're cooking dinner, like lots of things going on, but you can share this and then watch it in your own time. One of the first Facebook Lives we did with the Colorin community, it was viewed 3,000 times. And like, it's St. Paul, Minnesota. Like we in our district, we probably have about 400 Colorin families, right? So it was pretty obvious it was being shared pretty widely. I think it's just so unusual to be able to hear presentations in your own language. So they were sharing them with lots of people. And then finally, a lot of our school sites began doing Zoom town halls. And I think that the principals and educators will totally support that and keep it going, because what they found was we could have simultaneous interpreters in our Zoom room. So we would have like 3 or 4 languages represented on a language channel in that Zoom room. And it was so empowering for our multilingual families. In fact, number of our sites, there were more multilingual families in the Zoom town hall than native English speakers, which if you think about the kinds of barriers most of our families experience to come to school on a Tuesday night for a family event and get a ride and childcare, and maybe mom can't go because she needs to stay home and her dad is working. And so there can be a lot of barriers. This allowed them to be able to just get right on the call, and they're getting very savvy at using the interpreter channels. And we've been able to have really strong connections with our families that way. So those are some things we were able to implement this year. And my goal this summer is to write up sort of a multilingual outreach guide and put all of this in writing with the kinds of links and things people need, because I want it to be sustainable. We'll get new staff in. We're going to have two new principals this year. Like, I want it to be an expectation, and that they have easy access to how to do this. So other thoughts people have used or found successful with EL family engagement?
Has anybody used talking points? We keep hearing about talking points.
Mm-hmm. Or even a good interpreter service. The other thing I didn't mention is, just prior to the pandemic, we were rolling out a new interpreter service, and it allows you to do almost like a FaceTime, either on your phone or iPad. If you want the video, you don't have to have the video, but it basically is a one click. You just basically do the drop down. I want Spanish, I want Colorin. You click it and an interpreter comes on the line. And it really was opening up a lot of avenues for our staff in buildings to be able to connect with families. If they were coming to pick up their kid at the end of the day, you could run out there with your phone or iPad and be like, oh, wait, and then quick get an interpreter and have a quick conversation with the parents while they're picking up their kid. It allowed us to be able to just make quick phone calls and leave messages, and all of the educators who were using it felt very comfortable with it. Well, definitely by the end of the first spring of the pandemic, and they were very, very grateful to have that. And anytime that they said to me, I'm so nervous to use this interpreter service, I don't know if I'm going to hit the wrong button or how this will work, I always said, think about how our families feel when they need to contact us in a language they don't understand, and they know the person who answers the phone isn't going to be able to understand them, and yet they still do it to the best of their ability, right? We can do this. This is not that hard. And I allowed people to make practice phone calls. I'm like, just call, click the button, tell them, hi, I just wanted to see if this would work. I don't really have a family on the line, and just be comfortable with it. So I think giving people time to practice in a low stakes environment really makes a difference. I see that Eugenia added, I'd love to share with my education majors. Sounds like a great tool to use to connect with parents, definitely. And it's free. So I don't know how they do that, but I like free things that work well and help our multilingual families, right? So the second one, social emotional support. The tip I have, and Katie kind of alluded to this as well, is coordinate your social emotional learning work with others. So especially at the beginning of this school year, we started in distance learning. And so we had a lot of focus on social emotional learning. And I think every kid started every new class with some breathing exercise, or just picking a color for their mood, or doing whatever, and some of the kids were feeling like a little overwhelmed, like, okay, this is what I have to do every hour. So in our middle and high school, they did move it more to like what do you call it, the advisory time, and then for like just teachers, because it was a pretty intense day for our students. They were still attending like 4 hours of learning every day or whatever. We do more different kinds of activities. So really defining social emotional as fun, like play a game with the students, or let them have some downtime to chat. That's one of the things that was really missing in an online learning environment, was like everything's just get to business. It's like, boom, you're in the Zoom room. Now we're going to talk about math equations, and then you're going to do some activity pair work, and then boom, you're on to your next class. And if you think about our students in a learning environment, they have a lot of kind of little downtime. They might be like looking at each other and be like, where'd you get that hat? Oh my gosh, and like that kind of community is not built. It's just everything was like, get to work, get to work. So just taking a little more time and allowing some space for chatting, or if you do these assignments on Friday, you get to pick the YouTube video clip that we're going to watch, or whatever it is. So really defining social emotional work in different ways, so that students weren't doing the same breathing exercise every hour. And then, connect with in-district support staff and help them understand multilingual student needs. I put a link in here too to get training on mental health first aid. there's a book, actually, Mental Health First Aid, that is really helpful. I've worked with our cultural liaisons with this, and it has actual like dialogues in it. And it has things like, because we do have students who will mention like, I don't want to live anymore, like, okay, tell me more about that. Like, is that just I feel bad today and I'm being dramatic, or is it like, I really am struggling with a lot of things and this is my way to ask for help? So the Mental Health First Aid book has like questions you should ask and things you should consider, about what they may need next and that sort of thing. My goal for this next year in returning to better would be to connect with our cultural health agencies to make sure that we have some cultural and multilingual mental health support right in our buildings. There's a lot of students who really need to access that easily, and we need it to be in our buildings in a more significant way. I'm wondering if anybody else has suggestions around social, emotional, and or mental health support for multilingual students or families. You can put it in the chat. Good wait time.
Yes, Eugenia suggests Kahoot.
Oh, okay. Yes. Engaging tools. Yeah. Kahoot is fun. The kids like that. And yeah, I think there was a lot of growth with educators and even navigating, co-constructing, if you will, the learning environment, because kids learned about different tools in different classrooms, and then they would suggest it to a teacher. So they'd be like, why don't we do a Kahoot for this? And then the teacher's like, what do you mean? And then they're like, oh, it's this thing. And then like there was some agency there that I think was very powerful for students as well. Okay.
Also this year, I had the counselors at our school come in and actually talk about mental health and talking about the things that they could do to help the students in the classroom. Additionally, also trying to find ways to have the students learn in a different type of format. So maybe in lieu of talking about what could be at a rainforest, actually having them see and experience that. I mean, there's so much technology. There's so much technology out there. Yes, I love Nearpod too. That's an excellent
Nearpod is great.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to keep gabbing.
No, thank you for sharing. That's great. See, everybody's getting warmed up now. Please feel free, jump in. Because this is the other thing, is like, I am not here to tell you how to do this right. Like, these are just things that we experience and work for us. Everyone has been on their own journey, and there are so many strengths that people have. And the goal is just not to lose the things that work well, right? So another social emotional kind of connection, mood meter. I don't know if people have heard of that, but it comes from the Harvard Institute for Emotional Intelligence. It's evidence-based, and you see the little image there from the mood meter app. But basically the research-based foundation for it says, if you're feeling a certain way and you can label it and then understand why you're feeling that thing, you can then decide to shift into a different feeling if you're not feeling very good, or you can kind of determine how you want to keep that feeling going. So I started using this mood meter app myself because I recognized that I was on a roller coaster. Some days were great, some days I was crashing, some days I felt touchy about everything, and some days I just didn't want to get off the couch. I was just tired. So I started doing the mood meter app, and it gives you a little chart. And I'll let you in on a little secret. I found that my husband was stressing me out. So by looking at my little chart, work was pretty good. I was feeling pretty healthy. I was feeling pretty good. But the things that were really irritating me were things that my husband was doing. And of course, we're in a pandemic. We didn't even have kids at home. It was just the two of us. But that's the kind of stuff that happens. And you kind of just have it in the background of your mind and in your life, and not until you kind of see this pattern do you start to realize, oh yeah, I guess I should probably, address this or think about how I want to handle this differently, right? So I do think that we as educators can only do social emotional support if we're really practicing it ourselves and really understand our own emotions and our own needs within different contexts, and then we can help students do that too. But the app is really great. And so it might be something where you do a mood meter check-in, maybe a couple times a week to see just how students are doing. I would also just say, like, plan fun things for Monday. Mondays are such a drag. Every teacher I know has the Sunday night blues, like, oh, I have to go to work tomorrow. And of course, you feel better once you're there. But we always save fun things for Friday. Why can't fun be Monday? So that's my social emotional support speech. And here's a great resource. This is, so there are students who are coming forward now speaking out about some trauma and chronic stress things they experienced during the pandemic. And I kind of put it in the framework of, I've heard this with refugees, that like when they're in the refugee camps or refugee situation, like every day is a struggle and you're just trying to survive, and you don't have time to deal with some of the bigger emotional issues from some things you're experiencing. And it isn't until you're kind of in a safer place and moving in a new direction, like maybe when you come to the United States, that you really experience the deep depression and you start to be stuck on some of these trauma pieces that you experienced but couldn't process at that time. And I think that there are a number of our multilingual learners who are experiencing things like this that we didn't even know were going on for them during the pandemic. And now that we're coming out of the deep pandemic, they're starting to process it and need more support. So here's a great article with some ways to look at using the strengths that students bring to help them understand and work with the trauma and stress that they've been feeling. I'm wondering if anybody has anything else to offer around helping students address some of the trauma or stress that they've experienced. I will just also add that I think it's a great honor when a student trusts us enough to share some of the real heavy things that have gone on in their life. And when I was in the classroom as an ESL teacher, I would say I was often the first person to know about those things because I was a different kind of educator in their life, and I got to know them and their families in different ways than their classroom teachers did. So it's a real honor, and it's also a burden, and we need lots more resources to help us know how to work with our families and students in these ways.
Absolutely. And little did we know that this would become one of our most popular articles when we published it in 2017.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Timely. Questions? Any questions so far? Even if you want to hear from other people about some things that they might have experienced that you want insight on. We're sort of a little professional learning community here tonight.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Mm-hmm. Also, I just say if you have resources that you found helpful, please feel free to put them in the chat. It's wonderful to hear from others in different parts of the United States about what kinds of things they've found helpful. So. Okay, so this came out in the teachers who spoke about what I would say to myself, knowing what I know now. Oops, that's my dinner. You can hear the smoke alarm going off. We're all safe, don't worry. Okay, so the number one tip is
in my house.
What's that?
I thought it was my house.
No, it's my house. It's a 1914 house that was not built with real stoves in mind, and so all of the heat goes right up the stairwell to the conveniently placed heat and smoke alarm at the top of the stairs. So at any rate, we're all good, and I think my dinner is okay too. So tip number one, slow down. And I think a lot of educators figured this out pretty quickly, but it didn't always feel right. And we had a lot of administrators telling teachers, like, it's okay, slow down, do what kids need, start where they're at. And then at the same time, they'd say, and where are your learning goals? And how do you know students are learning? Where are your common formative assessment results? And teachers are like, I want to do what's best for kids. I know what's best for kids. And at the same time, I still feel pressure of not wanting to have low standards or low expectations. But definitely this is like number one tip. And I think that this is something that applies going forward too. We know there are students who sat in classes and maybe they were able to go through the motions. Maybe they were in a group activity and they were able to kind of do the work. But we need to find ways to differentiate and slow down for students who need that. Because otherwise we're just pushing through, right? So that's my mantra about this. And there's a quote here, Sue Stanley: "There is no shortcut to this. Nothing else is going to happen unless those kids feel safe and secure and loved. The best way to help them is to slow down." So we do need to make those connections with students before they learn, just like Katie said earlier.
And especially too, if you have ELLs mixed in with your general ed population in a classroom, if it's not a self-contained classroom, and that teacher is not as well informed as some others, with ESL strategies, that might be a very lonely experience, very silent square on your roster.
Yeah.
And I see, yes, Jamboard.
Yes. So I'm writing a little note back to everyone about that. So the Jamboard has been really great because as I visited classrooms, I realized what a blind spot it is when you're teaching to students online and you put them into these little Zoom groups or whatever, and you don't know what they're doing. Like as a teacher, we rely on those, eyes in the back of our head, right? Because you can kind of be working with a group over here and you know what's happening over there, or a student can just raise their hand and you're like, what do you need? And they tell you. When you do Zoom groups, they disappear. They're like in these little rooms, and then the teacher had to like hop around to see what's going on. And so a lot of the EL teachers would tell me that they had set everything up, given the students the dialogue, told them exactly what to work on, and they'd put them in the little Zoom group, expecting them to use language and discuss something. And then they would pop into the Zoom room and it's like dead silent. They're just sitting there and it's like, what are you doing? And then a little voice will say, we're reading this work or whatever. It's like, yes, you're supposed to use this dialogue and talk about it. So when you use the Jamboard, if you give them a task, you can actually see if they're working on it, because you can look at the multiple Jamboard pages and know where they're at. They can put a Post-it note on there and ask questions. So that became another background tool that was really helpful. And so collaboration is very important. A lot of our teachers really embraced collaboration in ways that they hadn't in the past. And I'd say there are two things to that. One is so many students were disappearing, and teachers were frantic to figure out how to make the content meaningful to them and how to differentiate so students could be successful and want to come to the classes. And then I'd also say that we built our schedule, at least in our district, to allow for purposeful collaboration time. So when we were in an online environment, we had 4 days a week of instruction, and 1 day a week was all about collaboration and professional development. So EL teachers in my district who had struggled to maybe get specific collaboration time with 1 or 2 grade level teams or content areas now had a day to kind of have a back-to-back meeting schedule to meet with multiple grade level teams and do some purposeful planning so they were more aligned with the instruction for those teams. So I do recognize that one of the biggest drawbacks to collaboration in educational environments is that we don't have enough time, and it's always something that's like crowbarred in a little bit to make it work. And so like, how can we really be intentional about this? How can we really advocate for these strong relationships to continue? And what collaboration tools worked really well? Obviously, because we used a lot of digital tools, I think teachers got more comfortable texting each other, using Google Docs or some kind of a interactive tool like that. And then some of them were able to hold time sacred, like I will every Tuesday before school meet with you and we'll do this. I think finding whatever works for you and having conversations right now with your administrators about what needs to be planned for the fall can really help build up this collaboration time. I've worked a long time with many building leaders to have them take on the kind of humongous task of making it so that there is common plan prep time at least once a week for EL teachers with grade level teams. And what this means is that usually it aligns with the teacher prep times. So it means that somebody has to teach reading in the afternoon. And if you work at the elementary level, you know, almost every teacher is like, I can't teach reading in the afternoon. I need them fresh. They need to be able to focus, right? Well, you know, there are a lot of things that need to happen in a day for learning, and collaboration is one of them. And if you hold that as in high esteem, you will prioritize it. And I haven't seen any research studies that show that kids who get reading instruction in the afternoon don't learn to read, but I haven't really looked for it either. So I'll just say that. So hopefully you'll be able to have some really meaningful conversations about collaboration, because it will pay off in the long run. Anybody have any positive collaboration stories to share or tips that they found worked well? No? Well, I will just say that I am happy to see people embracing collaboration. And I will admit that when I was a beginning ESL teacher, the way collaboration was introduced to me was horrible. And for a long time, I didn't want to collaborate with anyone. I'm like, give me my little ESL students. I know what to do with them. I'm good, right? But of course, as time went on, I realized that most people just haven't had a very good collaboration experience. And for a lot of technical reasons, like there's no time to collaborate, nobody really talks about what the collaboration should look like or what's the purpose of it, lots of things like that. And once you have some real intentional practices in place, it can be very, very powerful for our students, definitely. So finally, advocating for ELs. In my district, we've made a very conscious choice to change our language around what has happened in the pandemic. It's not pandemic learning loss. We talk a lot about interrupted learning. I like to say that all students are now SLIFE students, or students with limited interrupted formal education, at least for the last year. Everybody has experienced interrupted learning. So we're really trying to take the onus off of like the students lost something, or it was all focused on what they didn't do. Because as we said earlier, there's a lot of things that they did really well. Many of them became little tech instructors for other people, even their teachers, right? So we know that it's not all lost. There was a lot gained. It just wasn't, they weren't the things that we normally look to gain in a year, right? And so we really want to say interrupted learning. We want to really focus on what do they need going forward. These are some of our most vulnerable learners. Yes, they did miss a lot of opportunities to speak in English or their native language in an academic setting. So what are we going to do going forward to ensure that they continue to have opportunities to build on that? And we really want to consider the well-being of students before ramping up any academic pressure. I love it that there is new funding coming into our states and our districts to support learning and address the learning gaps. However, I am very concerned that a lot of that money will be used to do a lot of remediation rather than the kinds of enrichment and direct targeting of resources to our vulnerable learners, like multilingual learners or special education students. So again, a lot of this money is coming in now, and people are starting to look at it and make decisions about it. So I would say, if you're comfortable with it, ask your district leaders, how much money are we getting from the government to help with these things? What are the requirements that have been placed on this funding? I know like this Minnesota, where I am, the Department of Education is doing a lot of town hall type meetings and getting feedback about the, what is that funding? It's ARC, is it? I forget what it stands for, but basically money to help education recover from this pandemic learning. And so they're asking people, what are the priorities we should put on this funding as we send it out to districts? So all of this is public information. Make sure that you have the knowledge and can get to some of those tables where people will be talking about where to allocate this money. I'm voting for mental health services and increased, accountability for connections with families. That's what I want to see. And I just want a specific amount of money to be targeted to English learners. Let's get real. Anytime they give us a pot of money and they say this money is for vulnerable learners, that nobody immediately thinks of multilingual learners. They're thinking like kids who are 2 grade levels below in reading or, whatever. I want a pot of money just for multilingual learners. Hey, Katie's got her hand up.
There was an article in Ed Weekly this morning titled "Helping Students Bounce Back from a Disrupted Year, Strategies for Schools." And the article essentially says that newcomer centers are the best models for how to reintroduce students and prepare staff. And I find it interesting that the models that help disrupted, as you were saying, disrupted education are, there's articles out there saying this is what has happened. So these are our students and everyone has experienced this. So let's learn from best practices.
Right.
So I can see if I can find the link and put it in here if you're if you have a subscription. So
that's awesome. And thank you for sharing that, because it does show how words are powerful and they create this framework. And so like, to me, I've been telling the EL teachers I work with, I'm like, this is our time to shine. We've been preparing for this day forever. And so like, we have these EL coaches in our buildings basically. And so I'm like, let's call ourselves differentiation coaches, because that's what we do really well. We can help educators who get new students in next fall, half of whom are behind or didn't maybe learn the concepts they were supposed to before 4th grade, whatever. That's what we do well. Like, we can do this. And so sometimes looking at the language we use and how we promote our skills can make it really, really valuable. So thank you for sharing that. I look forward to reading that article.
And I put a little bit of information there in the chat. But the Internationals network of schools, they mostly run in New York, but they just opened up another school. It's a network of public schools. Mm-hmm. And their approach has been adopted by Prince George's County in Maryland, by one of their schools. And so it just makes such a difference to have every single educator and staff person in the building be tuned in to the needs of English language learners. And many times teachers who go on to work, in mixed schools, like most of the population, they find that the strategies that they learned for newcomers work for all their kids really well.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Katie.
Oh, yay. Thank you. Great.
So we're still on advocacy, Christina.
Well, I think I said everything. I sort of rambled a little bit. Yeah, we'll move forward. So here's my point. Learn about funding in your district and beyond. Google has little search things. You can put terms in if there are things that you're interested in getting flagged for your review. You can put in things about English learner resources or, ARC funding and ELLs or something. Like, there's different search terms you can use, but however you stay connected, it is public information, and you have a right to, and our families have a right to know where that funding is going and how it will be used.
And these little thumbnails are of guides that have been produced by, one of them is by the Education Trust and Unidos US, which is an advocacy organization for the Latinx community. And this just came out on targeting resources from the current pool of funding to address the needs of ELLs. So you just, do a quick, Google search, but we'll also have these resources on the Colorin Colorado page for resources that we're citing. And then the Migration Policy Institute also has extremely useful information on how to achieve an equitable system, how to advocate for this funding. Sometimes, administrators get caught off guard when they have, a teacher talk to them about, well, there's this funding and that funding.
Right.
Sometimes they don't expect you to have, this information. And many times it works wonders because then they have, you have lit the fire. And then they have to respond. They have to, get an answer from the school district on how that particular pool of funding is being used.
Yeah, definitely. So I would always start with a conversation with, your building principal or district leaders about kind of what's happening with this. And then if you feel like it's not getting you where you need to be, if you write a letter to the school board, at least I think this is true everywhere, they need to respond to you if you ask for a response. So that is something to consider if you want to say, like, I really want to know how this funding is being allocated and supporting our multilingual learners, and I haven't been able to get an answer. I would like to know. Then they will get the answer and they need to respond to you. It doesn't mean it will happen the way you want it to be, but you will get a response. So. And here's a great article. Do you want to talk about this, Giselle, or just?
So this puts it together. I mean, pretty much everything that Christina's speaking to. We had another author, another educator write this article for us on just all the different kinds of advocacy that you can do. And these articles on Colorin Colorado are a great way also for not just for your own professional learning, but to also learn how to lead these kinds of conversations at your school or with other colleagues, because there is just so much out there. And the nice thing about Colorin Colorado is that we put it all together for you in one place.
Right.
So
many great resources. So
yes.
Yeah.
Indeed. And I'm going to skip this page just in the interest of time, Christina. But this is a great video interview that we did with the National Teacher of the Year, who talks about self-care and how important that is. So that video is newly produced
and it's on YouTube. So if you put that name in,
I get to talk to teachers from across the state and across the country frequently.
Oops.
There you go. And I do want to say, like, I don't want to dump on administrators. They have had a very, very hard year. Nobody prepared us to be leaders in this environment. And so especially principals, big kudos to them. I recognize how much they were on the front lines with everything. Teachers needed things, students needed things, parents needed things. They were just getting information from district trying to figure out what's going on. So, lots and lots of grace to everyone, and looking forward to returning to better for sure.
Absolutely. And so here are just some of the topics that you're going to find on Colorin Colorado. And as I was telling you earlier, this is a project that I initiated at the AFT many years ago, because we were getting so many requests from around the country in terms of, can you tell me what the research says around EL instruction? Can you send me some strategies that work in the math classroom? Can you tell me how to reach out to families? Do you have any information around what kind of culturally relevant books, storybooks to choose? And so we just kept getting so many inquiries at the AFT from our local unions all around. And I was new at the time at AFT. I was a policy generalist, um, but the inquiries came to me because I'm bilingual, and so people assumed if you're bilingual that you know all about instruction for English language learners, and I can tell you that is not the case. I had some amazing ESL teachers throughout my whole life, but it's not the same thing. And so we convened a group of expert educators, classroom people, and Christina Robertson was one of them, so that they could advise us on what should go on this website, what kind of articles would you write to other educators, which researchers should we be featuring on here. So it's a highly curated site. It's all free. And gosh, I can't say enough about it. I mean, there are thousands of resources on it now. We started out with about 30 some resources on it. Now there are thousands. So we'll
I just have to tell a quick story because I was invited to be part of this advisory team and came out to Washington, D.C. And one of the first things they did after we talked about important things, whatever, was they brought us into this little computer lab and said, well, we're going to start this new website. It's called Colorin, Colorado, and we want it to be a resource for everything bilingual and da-da-da. And I just remember looking at this and thinking, like, what? Like, who's going to go there? Like, what's going to be on there? Like, I don't know. What a great visionary I am. It tells you why I'm never going to retire. I don't have any big tech startup in my background. But anyways, I was like, and then like 5 years later, it was pretty much a household name. It really grew. And I'm just so proud of that vision and the opportunity to be part of it. And people still have opportunities to be part of it. Lydia Reseth, who is the manager of the site, is always looking for new content and people with new insights to share on the website. Really great resources. So it's number one thing I always recommend to anybody who's looking to work with multilingual learners.
And I just added just a little information about what Colorin Colorado means. Because our union locals in Colorado at first thought that we had named it after them. And while we were flattered and while there was great work going on in Colorado for ELLs, our initial intention was to reach Spanish-speaking families. Of course, you fast forward 17 years since that launch, and it's about all English language learners in from all language backgrounds. But we kept the name just because we've loved it for so long, and it's become, like Christina said, a household name. So these are some of the latest articles that we have for you. Is one of the articles is on unaccompanied minors, what schools need to know. There are many kids being processed at the southern border right now, and they are landing in school districts all over the country. And there is a whole set of information to know about how to work best with unaccompanied minors. We have information on Indigenous Latinx students. We have many families who come from Latin American countries who speak Spanish as a second language, but their Indigenous language is their first language. And many times school districts just send the information in Spanish without knowing that this is not really the home language for that community of kids. And we have a particular article on Indigenous Guatemalan families. There are many of them all over the country, but they're concentrated in places like Providence, Rhode Island. and in Baltimore, New York City, Los Angeles. So we have information for the educators who work with them. Those are some of our newest resources on here. We have a great article about this elementary school in Dearborn that is right now, as we are speaking, launching the summer program with all these different activities going on, and how they're doing it and how it's going. So it's a great article to read on what can be done this summer. And this feature here, this video feature, is about the schools in Dearborn, Michigan, where we did a video production about how welcoming the schools are to its largely refugee Middle Eastern population. And this video production won the Michigan Emmy and was nominated for an Emmy Award. So.
I'm Nabila Nasser. I'm in the Sinti class. I'm in 6th grade. I'm from Yemen.
Before starting her new school in Dearborn, Michigan, 12-year-old Nabila was worried.
Because I don't know anyone, I don't know the language they talk, and I think they are going to laugh about me.
New immigrants like Nabila have a lot to cope with when they get to middle school. Many of them have been separated from their families.
You'll notice that a lot of the students don't have their moms here.
Because her visa was like something happened wrong on it, and they said she's gonna stay and we can. And then I missed her. I cried all the time.
Many students have seen terrible things in their home country.
We heard one explosion, and one inside the school and one outside the school. That's when the worst started.
Anytime there was a loud noise, this poor little kindergarten boy would just hit the floor and he would cry because where he came from, there were bombs.
It can be hard for children to stay focused on school when they've experienced so much trauma. Here in the Dearborn Public Schools, just outside of Detroit, nearly half of all students are English language learners, and new immigrant students arrive year-round from war-torn places.
We struggled with providing support for students that were bilingual at the time.
It was hard because there were so many different levels.
I'm not gonna lie to you and act like it's a piece of cake. It's not.
How do teachers make these kids feel safe so they can learn?
We want to change the world, and we want to give our students every opportunity.
Morning, guys. How you doing?
At Salina Intermediate School in Dearborn, Michigan, Principal Jamal Lawera welcomes students as they arrive from their homes across the train tracks from a steel factory.
Higher.
For 100 years, Dearborn has been home to immigrants from around the world. They come to work at Ford Motor Company and other nearby plants. Today, many in this neighborhood have come from Yemen, a small country in the Arabian Peninsula. In the last few years, new students have been coming because of Yemen's devastating war. Students like 12-year-old Nabila.
Oh, Lydia put up the whole video.
Sorry, I didn't know if that was the end.
No, that was a sneak peek. Sorry.
The rest of it. It's a great video. Very nice.
Yes. So here's another wonderful new video that you will find on the resource page about kids from Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria in Syracuse, New York. And here you'll also see features of new teachers and new teacher advice and experts providing advice to new teachers. This is one of the latest resources.
Mm-hmm.
We have literacy tip sheets in 16 languages now. And these little JPEG graphics that you can send over the phone now. So that's available to you. Also, we have information on special ed. We have information on anti-Asian bullying and what can be done about it. All right, so I am going to stop my share now and see if we have any other questions. But gosh, I just want to thank you for your patience and your time this Thursday afternoon before the holidays. So
yes, and I did put a question in the chat if you want to write a response, or if you want to unmute yourself. Just wondering what your takeaways are from this session, and what will you share with others or use in your setting if there's something that you found useful. This is where I wish I had Oprah's skills. Like, come on. Anyone?
or you can use your little reactions, and
that's right. You could give us emojis
and say if you plan to look up the articles or the videos. You can give us a thumbs up on that. Maybe people are driving.
They could be, or they could be eating dinner. There's lots of things that could be going on at home. I totally understand. Oh, Danielle had to step away. Okay. Yep. See, it's dinner time.
Yeah.
This is multitasking. This is what happens. So we understand.
We completely.
Katie's back with us. Let's put Katie on the spot because she's been brave and unmuted herself before. So I know she could do this.
And thank you for the comment, Eugenia. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So the question is just how might you use this information? What takeaways do you have?
So we're a high school district.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're speaking specifically about Colorin, Colorado.
Or anything from this session that
the whole session.
Your interest or, yeah, I mean, especially around the concept of like, maybe you've thought about some things that, yeah, we did do this well, and I'm going to revisit this and make sure that we don't lose it. Or
I think your two guiding questions at the beginning are really important. And I think that for any strategic planning, those questions should be ongoing, so that we don't lose sight of, mid-year, mid-fall, what was happening last year, how did we respond? So I think those two guiding questions were really important. I also have Post-its here, so I need to check out the share my lesson. It reminded me that this weekend, unfortunately, though it's Memorial Day weekend, I probably need to look at the curriculum that our district is looking to adopt for SEL to see if it's aligned with some of what we heard. So,
yeah.
And that's all. And I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, well, we appreciate your time. Thank you for being here. I will say the other thing that in my district, I've really enjoyed. I've been in my district 6 years, and I've never seen this in any other district, but the question that people ask each other about a lot of decisions is, who will be privileged by this? So if we do this thing, if we drop our interpreter services, if we do whatever, who will be privileged by this decision, or who will be harmed by it? And so that's been a very important question, and I intend to use it a lot this spring as we start thinking about where we'll focus next year. So yeah, I agree. Questions are good. Yeah. So thank you. I see we have some other comments here. Definitely Colorin, Colorado is such a wealth of resources, and if you can just find a couple of items to share and discuss, that can be the beginning of some really important work.
Super. Gosh, we can't say enough about how word of mouth is really the only way we've been able to advertise the site. So share it wide.
Yep, exactly. Thank you. Katie's got to go.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you. Thank you, Danielle and Estella, Emily,
everyone,
Julia,
for your time.
Thank you, ladies. It was really very, very interesting and a lot of information. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I want to thank Giselle and Christina for hosting, and you talk about multitasking. My dog needed to come outside, so I had to move slow. But I really appreciate both of you taking the time and for this presentation. And thanks to all of our participants for joining us.
Yep, that's great.
Great.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you, Christina.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure. So yeah, let me know if anybody follows up or has more questions. I'm always happy to help. So
Well, we'll see you at Teach.
thank you. Okay, go enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Both of you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.